Almost immediately after Trump took office back in 2017, it became clear he was going to use the presidency to enrich himself personally in a way no president had ever done before. One of his favorite schemes was to have himself or members of his family stay at one of his properties and then charge the government for the cost of lodging the Secret Service agents tasked with protecting them. Now, the president and his family have a large Secret Service detail, so if they're staying at a Trump property, that means the Secret Service is too. And that public money goes back to Trump and his family personally. But it gets worse. Today, in a letter from the House Oversight Committee to the head of the Secret Service, congressional investigators revealed that Trump was charging the government exorbitant rates to stay at his hotels. Quote, the former president's company charged the Secret Service excessive nightly rates on dozens of trips. These rates were as high as $1,185 per room per night, more than 5 times the government rate. Joining me now is a member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Gerry Connolly, Democrat of Virginia. He's been working for 5 years to fully expose the depths of Trump's grift. Congressman, it's great to have you. First of all, tell me what you found overall here.
Well, you pointed it out, but I mean, we know that Trump and his family stayed at Trump properties hundreds of times during his 4 years as president. And in all of those cases, as your reporting points out, they had to be protected by the Secret Service and they had to stay somewhere. Eric Trump promised that they would be able to stay free of charge or at worst at cost. We now learn that in at least 40 cases we've uncovered, Trump's Secret Service detail stayed at the Trump Hotel downtown at a cost of $1,185 per night, when the federal per diem rate is $201 per night. So a 5-fold markup, hardly free or hardly at cost as promised by Eric Trump. So here we have an egregious case, not only of outright lying about what in fact they were prepared to do for the Secret Service, which after all is doing its job in protecting the first family, and a level of venality that is jaw-dropping.
I want to play for you that quote you referenced, which is Eric Trump making this pledge, which at the time seemed obviously untrue, but now we have definitive proof of it. Take a listen.
Anytime the government comes and, if my father travels, they stay at our properties for free, meaning like, cost for housekeeping effectively, because you actually have to legally charge government something. So everywhere that he goes, if he stays at one of his places, the government actually spends, meaning it saves a fortune, because if they were to go to a hotel across the street, they'd be charging $500 a night, whereas, we charge them like, $50, right? And they're there on property.
So he was off by a factor of like 22 is what you're saying when he says $50?
Pretty expensive housekeeping.
So here's the broader question. This is one of those things where how did it take 5 years? Why is it 5 years that we have like definitive proof of this, or 4 years, or even 3 years from a certain trip? Like, why did it take so long? And was the Secret Service, were they cooperative with your inquiries?
Well, let's go back to 2016. The late Elijah Cummings, who was then the ranking member of our committee and became chairman, and I had a hearing in December of 2016 in which we had the ethics czar from the Bush White House, Richard Painter, and the ethics czar from the Obama White House, Norm Eisen. Mm-hmm. And they both testified on a bipartisan basis that the emoluments clause, which is a fancy word for saying the president cannot enrich himself at the public expense while in office, is in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And it's against the Constitution for the president of the United States to do exactly what Donald Trump did. Yes. Which was enrich himself at the public expense with a lease, a public lease that should not have been granted to him once he became president, at what became the Trump Hotel downtown, a lease that was granted to him by the General Services Administration. So all of this has its roots in that, and nobody at the time wanted to pay any attention to the fact that there would be inherent and myriad conflicts of interest once Donald Trump took that oath, because he had properties downtown Washington, he had properties all over the world, and he was going to exploit that fact to enrich himself and his family. And that's precisely what he did in front of everybody's eyes. You just reported on getting the Vice President of the United States to stay at a fairly remote location in Ireland, far away from Dublin, even though his business was in Dublin. So, foreign governments curried favor with him by renting rooms and having receptions at the Trump Hotel. That is clearly unconstitutional. That's why the founders and the writers of the Constitution wrote it in. Yes. And yet nobody paid any attention. So all of a sudden, we now have a revelation that this extended to the Secret Service itself, not that they were corrupt, but that they were between a rock and a hard place in protecting the first family and being pressured to stay at Trump properties at exorbitant prices.
Yeah, of course, that's the whole point, right? They're squeezed. They can't stay anywhere else. So then you charge them $1,200 a night. Congressman Jerry Connolly of the Oversight Committee, Congressman for Virginia, thanks so much for your time.